In part 1 of this series of videos, I described my views of Germans based on my personal experiences with their wild ways and why I despise them, and how my exposes of them on my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, are fulfilling another Bible prophecy. In part 2 video, I described God's opinion of the Germans. In part 3 video, I described what judgments God has made about the Germans in Bible prophecies and messages to me. In this part 4 video, I describe God's judgments on German masqueraders and other German allies such as Indians, Palestinians, and Pashtuns and Afghans. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In part 3 video, I stated that if nations can bring the Germans to justice militarily, the length of time they will be secure from depredations from Germany will depend on how much of the German population they destroy. If they leave many Germans alive, they'll gain strength quickly and menace other nations in a very short time. The two world wars have taught us that lesson. Based on various Bible prophecies, examples of God's judgment on various people who came into conflict with ancient Israel, the judgment I reached was that close to two-thirds of the German population should be destroyed, especially considering the fact that they plan to exterminate, means kill 100% of the population of whites of non-German ancestry and their allies in the United States, British Commonwealth nations, and Israel, or UBI nations. Ultimately, God is going to let Germans be destroyed such that perhaps only between 8 to 19 Germans will be left alive. The key lesson about God's judgments on the Germans is that He knows the Germans will not change. They will not give up their cruel and vile ways of heaping filth on other people unless they are dealt with the same cruelty and filth is heaped on them. God has prophesied that it will happen to them. It is incumbent upon other nations to give them a taste of their own medicine, as God counsels in Obadiah 1 verse 15, the New Living Translation. The day is near when I, the Lord, will judge all godless nations. As you have done to Israel, so it will be done to you. All your evil deeds will fall back on your own heads. Otherwise, other people will continue to be subjected to the same vile, evil ways. Frank Walter Steinmeier had to be taught the hard way to stop mistreating other foreign leaders by yanking away his face from them by being mistreated the same way when he was foreign minister. Foreign leaders drove him away from being foreign minister of Germany. Germans were forgiven after World War II. Corrie ten Boom, the Dutch survivor of Nazi concentration camps when she was miraculously let go, has documented the reaction of the Germans in one of her books after the war ended. She said that some Germans felt remorse for the atrocities they had committed during the war, whereas others went merrily about their daily lives as if nothing had happened. Such Germans were convinced that their god Satan had looked after them so that the Allies did not inflict the same punishment on them as they had inflicted on other people during the war. Their attitude and propensity to treat people with cruelty will not change until they are forced to suffer the same horrors they perpetrated on others. They feel justified in using cruelty because they are obeying their god Satan the devil, who guided them to commit all the atrocities. Judgments against the Germans, German masqueraders, and other peoples have not been made lightly. I have researched from the Bible, mulled and prayed over the issue for more than 2 decades since the cruelty of the Germans and German masqueraders was discovered around 2000 and 2001, and their hand in instigating wars and atrocities around the world. Our nations have a tendency to overlook the atrocities committed against just a few of our people instead of pursuing the perpetrators all over the world until they are destroyed as a warning to any would be perpetrators in the future. Terrorists and Germans are encouraged to take full advantage of our forgiving and tolerant attitude and continue committing more atrocities endlessly. King David of ancient Israel did not forgive because ancient Israel had a history of forgiving and their enemies kept coming back at them. He dealt extremely harshly with those who committed atrocities against his nation. He was called a man after God's own heart. No nation has returned the cruelty of the Germans back on them in full measure. That's why their minds are set on doing their evil with the utmost cruelty. German masqueraders in collusion with the Germans have also done their best to lead us astray from God and commit all kinds of sins, even driving God away from schools, colleges, and from public life, including all kinds of sexual sins. In Moses' time, the Midianites led Israelites astray from God by committing adultery, by their women committing adultery with the men. Moses had them destroy the Midianites, saving only virgins alive. This story is given in Numbers 31. Judgment on German masqueraders is described later. Unless the Germans are given back everything in full measure according to what they've done to other people since the beginning of World War II, as God counsels in Obadiah 1 verse 15, they will not hesitate to inflict the same and even worse uh, gleefully on their victims, as they think their God Satan will protect them, and because they are simply obeying him as he guides them. They have never had to face cruelty in retaliation for their cruelty. They've always been able to escape cruelty. Therefore, inwardly, they are confident that Satan will continue to protect them from such retaliation. Even if they lose the war, the Germans are confident they'll be forgiven just as after both world wars by simply feigning a humble, remorseful attitude, as the German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer did after World War II. They think they have feigning deep remorse and feeling deep shame for the wrongs they have done down to an art form. They will start behaving as if they are deeply sorry for what they've done and will never ever make that mistake again and will now forever remain your best friends for forgiving them. They feel confident that they can outwit anyone as they did after the two world wars. I know that because I have been made uh, I know that because I have been fooled by them for decades. Those who have made multiple attempts on my life have been German masqueraders whom I thought to be my very best friends. I was thinking of rewarding them by gifting millions of dollars each to them. They were also doing me harm while I thought they were helping me as my best friends. That's how diabolically cunning they can be. Once you know a person is a German or a German masquerader, I advise you not to trust him or her ever. Why? Because Satan guides them and they obey him without question. That's how they get their deceptive cunning. It has been beneficial for them in their history. We believe every human life is sacred. That's why we don't inflict cruelty on others and often forgive them. But that's not what the Germans believe. They believe they only are divine and their life sacred, whereas all other humans are like animals such as cats, dogs, and cattle and have no future beyond their physical life. Therefore, they can use them as they wish to serve them or inflict as much cruelty on them as they can. They think the only way to keep an animal in line and obedient is by punishing it cruelly. Since they believe other humans are mere animals, the only way to keep them alive and obedient and serving them is by punishing them with cruelty. Inflicting cruelty keeps other nations terrified of them, which the Germans believe works to their advantage. A German general in the past is supposed to have said that they like keeping their neighbors terrified of them using whatever strategies are necessary. That way, they will be terrified of joining alliances opposed to them. If you inflict the same punishment on them as they've inflicted on you, in the future they'll think twice before committing the same cruel atrocities against you, knowing that they will get exactly the same in return. Since individual Germans have to inflict cruelty on other people, if in their recent history their people have been subjected to cruelty and retaliation, they will have that lesson indelibly imprinted in their minds and will be less inclined to be cruel. That's the only way to lessen the cruelty they will inflict on UBI nations and others during the Great Tribulation, when they are prophesied to be victorious. The two witnesses of Revelation 11 verses 5 to 6, which were state, "And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will." So, the two witnesses of Revelation 11 will also be reminding and discouraging the Germans and the world throughout the Great Tribulation to not inflict cruelty on their captives by inflicting plagues on those who do so as swift punishment. Now, in this part 4 video, I will offer my judgments on various non German people but allied with the Germans based on the context I described in part 3 video. Now, German masqueraders are people of German ancestry living in white countries for centuries. First, I will describe my judgment on German masqueraders in UBI nations and then in other white countries. German masqueraders in UBI nations have perpetrated genocide in America and carried out murders in other UBI nations, though to a lesser degree. They've helped Germany loot our economies and looted the economies themselves. They've inflicted every kind of pain and suffering on our people that they could imagine, or Satan put in their minds. They are still pursuing the goal to exterminate whites of non German ancestry and their allies in our countries. They will not change. God knows that. God has already made a judgment concerning them through his prophecy in Ezekiel 9 verses 4 to 7 and 11. "And the Lord said unto him, another angel, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem. Since Jerusalem was the capital of undivided Israel, this prophecy applies to all the descendants of Israel, which also includes the Jews. Go through the, which includes their lands. It says, Go through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. These are members of God's church who sigh and cry for all the sins being committed in our cities. And to the others, meaning other angels, he said in my hearing, Go after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids, that's unmarried young women, and little children and women. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Sanctuary means God's church. Then they began at the ancient men. These are the leading ministers in God's church who have gone rogue, meaning committed murder to cement their relationship with German masquerader leadership, which were before the house. And he said unto them, Defile the house, and fill the courts with the slain. Go forth. And they went forth and slew in the city. Then in verse 11, And behold, the man clothed with linen, which had the inkhorn by his side, reported the matter, saying, I have done as you have commanded me. So God's judgment is unambiguous. They are to be exterminated, man, woman, and child. Not even young unmarried women are to be left alive. This judgment applies to all those allied with German masqueraders in UBI nations, because their goal is also to exterminate whites of non-German ancestry and their allies. Now, German masqueraders are of the same mind in every country. Their goal is to control the country and rule it and kill anyone who gets in their way. They have looted and helped Germany loot the economies of their countries, as they have done in UBI countries. Nazi Zelensky now poses an existential threat to Russia. A country will not have peace as long as there are some masqueraders living in the country. Do not forget Churchill's astute characterization of Germans. A Hun alive is a war in prospect. Therefore, my advice to every country is to exterminate the German masqueraders in their midst. Russia certainly will not leave any German masquerader alive, neither will Belarus. If Russia can, it will exterminate every German masquerader in Ukraine. I advise every country to treat them the same way as God has admonished UBI nations to do so. Exterminate them, man, woman, young unmarried woman, and child. Now, about so called Palestinians. The claim by the so called Palestinians that they are the original inhabitants of the land who have lived in it for more than 4,000 years is pure fiction. Many writers have noted that the land was sparsely populated and a desert. They know that a vast majority of them, perhaps more than 95%, are Arabs from different countries who came to the land after European Jewish settlers came in, bringing their capital, talents, and technology with them. Even the earlier population in the mid to late 19th century consisted of Muslims from many countries who had been placed there during the Ottoman Empire and empires before them. Virtually no original inhabitants who have lived in the land for more than 4,000 years exist or are already mixed with the vast number of immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Jewish settlers of the late 19th century created job opportunities through entrepreneurship, which Arabs from neighboring countries flocked in to take advantage of, because such job opportunities were unavailable in their own countries. In 1947 and 48, the Arab countries did not want a Jewish state in their midst. In November 1947, when the UN partitioned the land between the Jews and Arabs, the Arab nations of Egypt, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon attacked Israel. The Israeli Jews won miraculously, and many Arabs living in the land, who would later begin calling themselves Palestinians, fled as refugees to the Arab countries. Wherever they fled, they set up Palestine liberation organizations. Such movements began operating from Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Jordan. But the rulers of each of the countries controlled their funding and activities. Sometimes they stopped funding them if their other foreign policy interests and objectives required it. The Germans saw an opportunity in this situation. They decided to set up an organization, the Palestine Liberation Organization, beholden to them, help fund it, and invite Palestinians in all these countries to join this one organization. The aim was to punish the Jews in Israel for assiduously hunting down Nazi war criminals and their American and British supporters. They finally selected the highly energetic Yasser Arafat as their man to head the organization, who, as a civil engineer, was better educated than other Palestinian leaders, was a good fundraiser, and inclined to violence and killing to achieve his ends. The incentives the Germans offer to the leader they select is to make him king or chief ruler. That was the incentive offered to Arafat. Even Saddam Hussein of Iraq and Idi Amin of Uganda were their men. They succeeded in making them the rulers of their countries. They promised to make Arafat the king of Israel after they conquer the country and exterminate the Jews living there, advising him in the meanwhile to try and conquer Jordan. He nearly succeeded, but was eventually booted out and went to Lebanon. Then he nearly succeeded in Lebanon until the Israelis forced him out of there. But the German masqueraders, Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, and Shimon Peres, the Foreign Minister of Israel, orchestrated the Oslo Accords that finally allowed Arafat to settle in Israel, where he had not been allowed before because he was a designated terrorist, and to rule the Palestinians as head of the new Palestine National Authority. That's why the Israelis assassinated Rabin. The original purpose of the Germans for creating the Palestine Liberation Organization under Arafat was to destroy Israel. That purpose has not changed. It is a part of Hamas's charter. The incentive of Palestinians to never make peace with Israeli Jews and keep killing some through terrorism is that Germans will offer control of the entire land to Palestinians once they conquer it. That is why the Palestinians have always rejected any two-state solution or any negotiated settlement with Israel. The Germans still do not want them to make peace with Israel because their goal is to conquer UBI nation and exterminate them, as prophesied in Psalm 83 verse 4, which states, "They," that means the Arabs, Turks, Palestinians, and Germans, They have said, "Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance." Israel means the United States, British Commonwealth nations, as well as the Jewish nation of Israel. Palestinians have terrorized Americans, Britons, and Jews abroad and in Israel over the past 75 years. They willingly became hammers in the hands of the Germans to hammer us with their acts of terrorism. They cannot be forgiven. Americans and Britons accept the killing of one or a few of their citizens abroad too easily without retaliating. That's why killers and terrorists do not have much fear of killing them. But if a message was sent to would-be terrorists that if they target and kill any American, Briton, or Jew, we will come after them with all our might and exterminate them, their families, and their associates. They will think multiple times before committing a terrorist act against us. Germany has such a reputation. That's why the Germans can travel freely around the world without the fear of becoming targets of terrorists. That's why UBI nations should send such a message to all people who became willing hammers in the hands of the Germans to hammer us and our allies. Since their goals are the same as the goals of the Germans, the Palestinians must be subjected to the same punishment as the Germans. We must destroy close to two-thirds of their population. The Palestinians in Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon, have troubled the Jews in Israel the most and will not live in peace with them. They do not have an option. They and the allies of the Germans know that if they make any alliance with the Germans and have committed atrocities against the UBI nations and their allies, the UBI nations and their allies cannot forgive them and will do their best to bring them to justice. Therefore, their only support can come from the Germans and their allies. That's why they cannot disobey the Germans, who will target them for destruction if they do so. Hamas provides the perfect example. They know that they will get clobbered by Israel if they attack it. Yet they could not refuse the orders of the Germans or their Iranian backers to carry out the massacre of more than 1,400 Israeli Jews, including old men and women, children and infants, in their latest attack on Israel. Ripping a child out of a pregnant mother's belly is so heinous an atrocity in God's sight that He holds the top leadership responsible. That's why the entire top leadership of Hamas must be exterminated. Amos 1 verses 13 to 15 state, "Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border. But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it shall devour the palaces thereof, with shouting in the day of battle, with a tempest in the day of the whirlwind, and the king shall go into captivity, he and his princes together, says the Lord." The reason they must be exterminated is that besides this atrocity, they've been committing atrocities against UBI nations for the past 75 years. Since Palestinians will be allied with the Germans in any war with the UBI nations, my judgment is that two-thirds of Palestinian population in Israel, Gaza, West Bank, and Lebanon must be destroyed. All Palestinians living in the United States and British Commonwealth nations must also be exterminated. I would advise Jordan to do the same. This will send a message to them and any other nations that wants to become a hammer in the hands of the Germans to commit atrocities against UBI nations and their allies, that they can expect similar retribution. In my October 16, 2023 video titled World War Watch Part 1, What Will Hamas's attack on Israel lead to, and my advice to Israel, I proposed that a two-state solution be imposed on the Palestinians. It was merely my advice and was not based on any prophecy. However, I am not aware of the specific dangers Israel faces from the Palestinians in the Israeli territories, Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon, and the estimated 50 to 70% Jordanians of Palestinian origin, as I don't have access to military intelligence. It should be a given that Germany will exploit all this Palestinian population and keep urging them to destroy Israel and make it entirely their own country. If the two state solution border includes all the west bank of the Jordan River, it will be easy for the Palestinians in the new state to hook up with Jordanian Palestinians and pose an existential threat to Jordan and Israel, especially since they would be able to freely interact with Germany as a sovereign state. Israel must make security its paramount consideration. Even if a two state solution is agreed to, Israel must ensure that the Palestinians do not have a fighting army with weapons. They must not allow any nations, including Germany, to arm them or make any security alliances. Ignore the noise, especially from Germany and some Europeans, about not allowing the Palestinian state full sovereignty. Sovereignty should be allowed to govern themselves and not to have a fighting army, the sole purpose of which can be none other than making war on the Jews. One cannot ignore realities and put one's own security in jeopardy. In my suggestions for a two state solution, I have advised that Israel take the Temple Mount area and remove the Al Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock and place them wherever Jordan desires. Muslims have no right to the Jews and Christians' holy site because Muhammad was never in the land of Israel. My appeal to Muslims all over the world is that the God of the Bible is the only true creator God. There is no God called Allah. Allah is a myth created by Satan and palmed off as the Almighty God to Muslims. Please do not oppose the worship of the God of the Jews and Christians, who is also your creator God and the God of all humanity. He is the only true God. Please allow the Jews to build up a worship place for him if they want to, and do not oppose them. It should be a worship place for all of humanity. Isaiah 66 verse 23 states, "And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, says the Lord." Then Isaiah 56 verse 7, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all people." See also Zechariah 14 verses 16 to 17, which shows that all nations will come to Jerusalem to worship God. Now, how the various Indian groups are to be dealt with, who are allied with Germany since the mid 1950s, including Narendra Modi's Gujaratis and Jains, Rajputs of Rajasthan state, many of whom masquerade as Punjabis, Baniyas, whose origins are from Rajasthan, Bengalis of Bengal state, South Indians from states of Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana, Parsis who live mainly in Mumbai, Pathans, also known as Pashtuns, who are scattered all over India, whose origins are from Afghanistan. Now, many Pathans also masquerade as Punjabis. Just like the Palestinians living in UBI nations must be exterminated, all the Indian groups living in UBI countries allied with the Germans and German masqueraders must also be exterminated. Of all the Indians, God has made a judgment only on the Baniyas that they should be utterly destroyed. Most of them live among the Punjabis and have done the most harm to them. Our goal is to carry out God's judgment against them. A problem we face with the Baniyas is that they have married many Punjabi women, some with threats. After much prayer, the only way we can implement God's judgment is to carry out the judgment on all male children of such marriages and keep only the females alive who have not made a commitment to join the Baniya side. Now, the Pathans in India. They are not of Indian origin. They either came in as invaders from Afghanistan and settled in India, or immigrated through the porous borders over centuries. Most of them were Muslims, but many also converted to Hinduism and Sikhism, thus masquerading as Punjabis. They've been allied with the Germans since the mid 1950s, have been willing hammers in their hands to hammer the Sikhs, and have participated in all the discrimination against the Sikhs and Punjabis. Since, like the Baniyas, they live among the Punjabis, they will be subjected to the same judgment as the Baniyas for abusing all the good done to them by the Punjabis and allowing them to settle in our lands. They must be exterminated in India. The Pathan tribes attacked Kashmir immediately after India's independence. Then, in collusion with the Germans, the Pakistani Pashtun leader General Ayub Khan attacked India in 1965 to destroy the Sikhs and Punjabis. The Bengali general J.N. Chaudhary conspired to give orders to the Sikh general Harbakh Singh under his command to withdraw. General Harbakh Singh ignored his orders and saved the Punjabis. The Pakistani leader Yahya Khan was also a Pathan or Pashtun who instigated the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War with the goal of conquering Kashmir and the Punjabis all the way to Delhi. The Rajputs and the Parsis were in on the conspiracy with him. The Parsi general Sam Manekshaw deliberately left the Punjabi border lightly defended so that the Pakistani army would walk in, commit genocide on the Sikhs and Punjabis all the way to Delhi. The Pathans cannot be forgiven for these attempts to exterminate the Sikhs and destroy the Punjabis. Our goal is not to leave a single one of them alive in India. Now, Pathans in Pakistan have plunged Pakistan into wars with India in a bid to destroy the Punjabis and Sikhs. They have also looted Pakistan's economy, siphoning off the country's wealth and depositing it in foreign countries. Many of the leading Pakistani businessmen, such as the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and his brother and current Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, are Pathans masquerading as Punjabis in Pakistan. Since Pathans of Pakistan have done so much harm to the rest of Pakistanis, they should exterminate all the Pathans in their country. The Baluchis in Pakistan are also of Iranian origin and allied with China, Pashtuns, and the Germans against the Punjabis in Pakistan and India. Since they will most likely join the German side in the Third World War and will have the goal of destroying us, we will kill as many Baluchis as possible, but allow those who want to go back to Iran to escape and go back. At present, we have nothing against the Pashtuns of Afghanistan and other Afghans, but we know that they have allied themselves with the Germans and Chinese and plan to participate in the Third World War on their side. Their goal will be to attack Kashmir and Punjabis in India and exterminate the Sikhs and Punjabis. Our goal will be to destroy 1/3 of the population of Afghanistan if they attack us. The only reason I threaten the Afghans is that they can look at an alternative point of view. They've just considered what they will do after they attack North India and win. They have not even considered that they could lose and what would then be done to them. If that possibility is brought to their attention, it may prevent them from taking any rash action, such as attacking other nations and particularly North India. Now, Rajputs live in their own state of Rajasthan in India, but many masquerade as Punjabis. Masqueraders have obviously been able to do the most harm to the Punjabis. Of all the Indian people, the Rajputs made themselves the heaviest hammer in the hands of the Germans to hammer Sikhs and Punjabis, providing incentives to those who would murder them. They themselves murdered those who won awards for gallantry in Indian armed forces and medically murdered others. They collaborated with the Pathans of Pakistan to allow Punjabis and Sikhs in India to be attacked by Pakistan in 1965 and 1971 with the ultimate goal of exterminating them. Their judgment is the same as those who became hammers in the hands of the Germans. Our goal will be to destroy 2/3 of the Rajput population in Rajasthan and exterminate all Rajputs in all other Indian states. Children of those who have married Punjabi women will be treated the same way as the Baniyas who've been married to Punjabi women. Now, other Indians allied with Germany include the Gujaratis, Jains, Bengalis, Parsis, and South Indians. Though they have all participated in impoverishing the Sikhs and Punjabis and acquiesced to the wars to destroy the Sikhs and the wars with Pakistan and China, and will participate in the Third World War on the side of the Germans and the Chinese, they have not been the hammers in the hands of the Germans like the Palestinians, Pathans, Rajputs, and Baniyas have been. Though their goal is to exterminate the Punjabis, that will not be our goal. Our goal will be to destroy one third of the best of their population in India. Our goal will also be to exterminate their population in UBI nations because they seek to exterminate us, that's the UBI nations, and take over the lands in collaboration with German masqueraders. Now, why destroy one third of the population and not one half or two thirds or any other number? Now, God called David a man after his own heart, but did not permit him to build his temple because he had shed much blood on the earth. The maximum amount of blood he shed was that of the Moabites, of whom he killed two-thirds. That's why we will not kill two-thirds of the population of the countries and peoples that attack us, but do not live in our land, and have not become hammers in the hands of the Germans with perpetual enmity like the Palestinians, Rajputs, and Pathans. I had to pray hard for guidance from God. The maximum number I thought suitable to fit God's mercy was one third of the population. Besides India and Afghans, other likely nations that will war against us are China and Iran. Their goal will be to exterminate us and take over our lands for themselves. That will not be our goal. In the war, our goal will be to destroy one third of their populations so that God's punishment is cut short in mercy towards them. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, how Bible prophecy is playing an important role in world affairs, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini to view and get information on the latest videos.